It was very telling how the city did not listen to local groups and leaders in their failed attempt at a climate action levy. I promised to actually listen to our stakeholders and citizen leaders. The primary thing we need to do is to make sure that we are effective with our actions. As a financial manager and accounting instructor, I have the capacity and skills to ensure that we are following fiduciary responsibility with our actions to address climate change. We need to see to it that we are creating jobs along with climate solutions. As the only union member in this race, I am proud to be endorsed by the Central Labor Council, the Laborers Union, the Electrical Workers Union, and the Steelworkers Union, and the Northwest Washington Building Trades Council. We can ensure a just transition and bring our labor partners in as much as we do our environmental organizations as we transition to a clean energy economy. I also want to engage with our city employees to look at ways to address climate change locally. Our city employees are the most valuable resource. We need to listen to them to provide input on ways that we can address climate change through city actions and endeavors. We need to find a way to have our firefighters adapt to clean energy requirements. One way might be getting solar and wind at our fire stations. Our police and public works can be empowered to suggest and provide solutions that will have significant impact. I'm very honored to have the endorsement of our Bellingham Firefighters Union and our Police Guild and our public works employees. As a candidate that has over 40 years of living experience and serving in Bellingham, I believe that my strength to collaborate and build the relationships that solve problems is why I can succeed as your next city councilor at large. Thank you for your support.
Bellingham has a wealth of local expertise on climate issues and housing and so many other policy areas. And too often we work in silos. The important thing here is to move beyond individual actions and consumer choices. The greatest value, I think the greatest opportunity in working together with local organizations and activists is the potential to tackle harder questions together. We need to collectively recognize that building our city around cars is fundamentally incompatible with our climate reality. That's a difficult thing for one candidate to say or one organization to champion, but if we make it the consensus, we can overcome the significant resistance we're going to encounter. There is a danger of death by committee. Our city has an unfortunate habit of sequestering activists demanding action within an advisory board, which spends a year or more developing policy recommendations that are then ignored by city leadership that is wary of bold action and prefers to take small incremental steps and unanimous votes. That style of managing our city is just incompatible with the scale of crises we're facing. We need urgency and we need action. And when we build coalitions, we can pass policies at the scale we need to respond to the climate crisis. I'm eager to work with our amazing local advocates. I want to develop comprehensive long-term plans, but I also want to make sure that we're not waiting on those long-term plans before we start taking immediate action. We have plans sitting on shelves gathering dust. We need to follow through on those at the same time that we're looking forward to what else we can do on a bigger scale.
Leading with collaborative solutions is going to be imperative to having our community meet our climate action targets over the next several years. The City of Bellingham has done a great job leading by example with respect to implementation of municipal measures as outlined in our climate action plan. However, at this point in time, what's really imperative is that we focus on community actions and the community goals and targets that need to be accomplished to move our work forward. The impacts are going to be much broader at the community level. So what this requires is collaboration and partnership with organizations and individuals here in Bellingham who are already engaged in important climate action work. As a council member, this means working directly with those individuals and organizations to help develop policies and allocate funding that will help advance and leverage their work and efforts. We have to be doing this together, and it has to be a priority. A lot of times we focus on the fact that we're all very busy. Yes, we're busy, but when we don't have time for something, that's because it's not a priority. And at this point, climate action must be a priority for everyone in our community every day. So what's going to need to be done is to focus on education and outreach. Education and outreach with individuals who are already engaged in the work and next steps that they can take, as well as education and outreach with individuals in our community who aren't yet engaged in the work. The reality is that the actions taken by individuals will be different for each individual, but each individual has actions that they can take that will make a difference. So every action, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect across the entire city, as well as beyond our city into the county, state, and country. And really the future of our climate action work is dependent upon all of us being all in for climate action work all the time.
In Bellingham, we have a strong community of like-minded individuals and organizations dedicated to climate protections. When I introduced the single-use plastics ban, it took over a year of collaboration with organizations, restaurants, waste management companies, and other stakeholders to create the ordinance. It's this type of teamwork on a much larger scale that needs to happen to meet our climate goals. It will take partnerships locally, regionally, and with our representatives in Olympia to get us there. I have the relationships with those partners to make that work happen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Darrow. I use she, her pronouns. I am a candidate for City Council Ward 3 in Bellingham this year. I love this question about leveraging and supporting the work of organizations and activists in our community around climate justice and climate resiliency. As a community organizer for the past 8 years with community to community development, I have learned that building strong relationships and remaining accountable to community partners and families who are first and most impacted by climate change is absolutely critical. Through my work with community to community development, I have built strong relationships with the Whatcom Food Systems Network, Birchwood Food Desert Biters, Resources, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, Tierra y Libertad, all amazing organizations doing work toward climate justice and climate resiliency. As your next City Council representative for Ward 3, I will continue those relationships that I've built over the last 8 years. And I believe that we have an important opportunity to bring those voices into policy and budget decision-making spaces. So I'm really looking forward to doing that through people's movement assemblies and continuing to check in with folks. I think that democracy is a revolving door. So when people bring their issues and their solutions, we can look at implementing those, but we also need to check back in and make sure, how are we doing? And there has to be measurable results. So regular, not just town halls and listening sessions that don't go anywhere, but making sure that the folks to whom we're accountable are getting the results that they need in order to experience climate resiliency and help us through climate change impacts.
Hi Bellingham, it's Kim Lund, candidate for mayor of Bellingham, and I'm so glad that we are here having a climate-focused conversation today. Climate is a big part of my why on why I am a candidate right now. I know that we're going to have better outcomes when we listen to the experts in our community and when we rely on the local organizations that are close to our climate problems and go to work every day thinking about the solutions to move us forward. I know this to be true through my work as a member of Community Wise Bellingham analyzing the Gateway Pacific Terminal Coal Export Project. I know this as a member of the Whatcom County Planning Commission. Over 5 years of service there, we create better policy when we listen to local expertise like Resources, Stand.Earth, and the Whatcom Million Trees Project, of which I am a local board member. I spent the last year and a half working on the Climate Action Plan for Bellingham's K-12 school district, which is Whatcom County's largest employer, and that final product was shaped for the better by listening and inviting diverse voices to be part of that work. This is what I will be doing as mayor, The time is now to do this work. And as a mother, I think about not just doing this work for the community here today, but the generations that have come behind us. I'm excited to work alongside all of you because our progress forward on these important climate issues are going to move at the speed of trust. Thank you.
Collaboration is everything. You can't do public interest work without it. I'm not really sure you can do any meaningful work without collaborating. It's a necessary ingredient. We're fortunate to live in a community where there are lots of organizations working on climate work, nonprofits, community groups, local governments. Important work that's happening right now between the city and the county. A number of groups have convened. A joint climate action team is convened. There's a county climate coordinating committee that's engaged, made up of county, city, WTA, port, tribes, small cities, meeting on a regular basis, all of whom, of course, have tentacles out to the public. So important collaborative work is going on right now. The city is engaged in a lot of work with focus groups, specialty groups that we've convened to work on transportation, buildings, procurement of renewable energy. I think what I would do in my second term that grew out of lessons learned from my effort to create a climate action fund a couple of years ago. We engaged in a lot of important work, learned a lot of lessons, and made a lot of progress in that work. But after that, I realized there would be value in creating a climate roundtable. Sort of bring a lot of the various groups, or at least representatives from a lot of various groups together to meet and stay focused on priorities and commitments and keep this work going. So that's one thing that I'm going to do related to collaboration in the second term.
Climate adaptation and resiliency and reducing our carbon impact require more than just two priorities. It truly requires a multidisciplinary approach. However, the two priorities I will address here are preserving and expanding our tree canopy, while also ensuring effectiveness and cost basis accountability of our climate actions. Our tree canopy is our first line of protection and defense here in Bellingham. We can address our housing density requirements while not only protecting our current trees, but also expanding them. Regulations that encourage and enhance tree canopy landscaping design standards are the first step. Bellingham has the ability to lead in this area, just like we did with our plastic bag ordinance. Our city council can guide this legislation. We can also address these priorities through a no net loss regulation that requires developers to accommodate or mitigate their impacts to our natural carbon defenses, trees. There are many ways to address this, such as green roofs or other methods of forward thinking landscape and development standards. As a financial manager and fiduciary trained in risk management, I have the experience in dealing with millions of dollars as assets under management. I also teach accounting. This allows me to take a strong position of advocacy to ensure that our climate adaptations are actually having the effect that we want to see. We need to ensure that our climate protection actions are the most cost effective and impactful. It boils down to getting the most bang for your buck. As an example of this, looking at creating local jobs through grants and regulations with a future climate levy. This will benefit our economy while ensuring a just transition and combating climate change. Thank you for your support.
Climate change is a global challenge and an existential threat to humanity. But locally, the most effective way we can meet this challenge is by changing our built environment, thinking about where and how we live and move through our city. So first, on transportation, which accounts for 32% of community emissions in Bellingham, we need to make it easier to choose not to drive in our city. I'll admit that I still reach for my car keys more often than I reach for my bike helmet when I'm heading out the door. I don't always feel safe biking with my 3-year-old in unprotected bike lanes. In this and many other policy areas, Bellingham already has great plans put together by thoughtful local advocates, but our leaders have a terrible habit of not following through with action. We need to establish minimum bike parking requirements. We need to modernize our traffic laws to encourage mode shift, so allow bicyclists to proceed through a red light if they're not detected for 2 light cycles. Require drivers to provide at least 3 feet of distance between their vehicle and a bicycle when passing. These are both from the 2014 Bike Master Plan. Good ideas that we had 9 years ago and never followed through on. Second, good housing policy is also good climate policy. We need to encourage greater housing density and more affordable housing options within the city. Multifamily housing, which isn't legal to build within most of our city, is much more resource and energy efficient. It's also the only way to create homes that regular working people can actually afford. Allowing greater density prevents sprawl into woodlands and wetlands with all of their carbon absorbing capacity. It reduces traffic and carbon emissions, and it supports the development of better bike infrastructure and public transit. At the same time, we need to increase support for deep energy retrofits of our existing housing stock through amazing local groups like the Community Energy Challenge.
When I think about the top 2 priorities for the City of Bellingham over the next 2 years, first and foremost, I think about electrification. Electrification of new construction here within the city, retrofit and conversion of existing homes, dwellings, businesses, and commercial buildings, electrification of vehicles and the infrastructure needed to support use of electric vehicles on a daily basis. In addition, electrification of our energy sources, making sure that we are moving away from fossil fuels and using clean, green energy. So as a council member, I would support policies that advance electrification and support the allocation of funding and resources necessary to implement those policies. The second priority would be focused on the idea that climate action is something that we have to do every day, all day. And so looking at the community buy-in to climate action and how small actions can have broad impacts. So during my next term, I would bring forward legislation to restrict idling of gas vehicles within the city limits. So it might seem like a small impact if you turn the key to be idle-free for a few minutes every day. But when multiplied and magnified by the thousands of residents that we have here in the city, that impact could be quite broad. So once again, those priorities would be electrification and then focusing on small actions that the community can take. The City of Bellingham has taken great actions to lead by example, and now it's time for the community to do its part as well. As a leader and public servant on the City Council, I will be honored to help lead that work.
Two priority climate actions for me are increasing the availability of EV charging stations and electrifying all new commercial and residential buildings. The conversion to electric vehicles hinges on the availability of fast charging stations. The city is investing $2 million in public charging stations, but this is only a start. We need better incentives for home charging stations, and we need to find a solution for multifamily housing that makes it easier to charge vehicles. Last year, Council passed an ordinance amending city code that improved reaching our climate goals for commercial buildings and multifamily housing. The Council should consider expanding those improvements to all residential buildings and work with partners to create incentives to achieve those goals.
First of all, I think that the city needs to implement the HEAL Act, Healthy Environments for All Act, which is a state law that provides an implementation plan. It also provides a budget. So if we're working with our state partners and making sure that our plan is in line with the HEAL Act, then that is going to benefit us all. It's going to allow us access to those resources, but also the HEAL Act prioritizes climate justice. So making sure that workers and people of color are prioritized. And I think that's something that's missing from our climate action plan that needs to be implemented. The second piece is that I think that we need to support Resources Initiative, the Climate Resilient Northwest Washington Initiative. Resources is an amazing community partner, and they've done the work to look at how can we protect our natural ecosystems, but also defend our region from severe climate impacts, protecting the places we love, shorelines, streams, and rivers, but also looking at how resilient are we and what communities are first and most impacted. So I think it's really important for us to work with partners like Resources to make sure that not only do we have a climate action plan, but we've also got a climate resiliency plan, because we know that we have extreme heat, drought, wildfires, and flooding. Unfortunately, all things that climate change is bringing to us right now. We have to be able to prepare our community to withstand the projected impacts of climate change, and we need to be making those plans right now.
Question number 2 asked me to speak to the top 2 climate actions I will take within my first 2 years. And before I get into specifics, I wanted to share with you my broader framework, and that is to act with urgency to create a more hopeful and resilient future. As a lifelong resident of Bellingham, I am deeply rooted to this extraordinary place, and I would enter City Hall as mayor carrying with me the values of protecting both people and the natural world. So with that said, my top 2 things I would do is pick up our stalled urban forestry management plan. And I recognize that this work is complex, but it is essential. We need to protect our trees of significant and heritage trees throughout this community. We know the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to the next heat dome, so we can do this work with an eye towards equity as we go. We can look at innovative approaches like Miyawaki forests, which create biological lift, and protecting mature trees also aligns with our stormwater management goals as a city. The second thing I would do as mayor is create a broad and robust economic plan with a special emphasis on a just transition to a green economy. In addition, I want to accelerate the output of the working groups that are occurring both within the city and with the broader community at large. The output and plans that come out of these working groups are going to shape our next revision of our Climate Protection Action Plan. This is critical work, and this is the decade in which we need to be moving forward with the urgency to meet this moment. And as mayor, I am eager to resource and drive this work forward. Thank you.
When I became mayor of Bellingham, I wanted to elevate the prominence of climate work in our community. I created the first office of climate, and we have at the city instilled a culture by which we look through the climate lens in pretty much everything that we do. We're fully engaged in the work of mitigation, reducing emissions, and adaptation. We have staff working on both of those things. The work that we're doing in mitigation is broad. It includes building, transportation, community education, the effort by which we are going to procure renewable energy, and we have a range of programs under each. One particular project that I would identify for your request is the work that we're doing on a pilot right now, which is going to help us identify how low-income homeowners who are on natural gas systems can transition to renewable systems. We anticipate a lot of important work and insight coming from that project that's going to inform how we can scale up and then deliver assistance throughout our community. In the adaptation realm, a broad range, including work that we're doing with the urban wildland interface, as they say, sea level rise, and since you're asking for a particular example of a priority, creating resiliency hubs through our community, given extreme weather, including where people can go in extreme heat and smoke. And we're developing this with an equity lens that is going to assist first with those people with special sensitivities, medically disadvantaged, and the homeless population. A lot of really good work going on in the city, but those are a couple of things that I look forward to emphasizing in the second term.
As I look at remodeling my house, I commit to utilizing green building techniques and energy efficient appliances. Thank you very much.
I recently got a big cargo basket for the back of my bike, and I feel ridiculous driving my 4-door, 900-pound battery on wheels to pick up a gallon of milk. So this year, I'm going to try to ride my bike to the grocery store.
My one personal climate action for this upcoming year is to shift my transportation mode and to prioritize walking, biking, and taking the bus whenever possible, every day.
One personal climate action that I'm willing to take this next year is to stop eating beef.
A personal climate action that I'm committing to for the coming year and a smart action is to run a new program on our thermostat. We're committing to lowering our set point by 2 degrees. And that means when I get cold, I'm going to layer up. I'm committing to wearing sweaters and down vests like I am right now, and lots of blankets around the house so that we can not only save money in our pocketbook, but also reduce our use and reliance on natural gas as we go.
I will commit to 2 smart trips a week, taking the bus or riding my bike to work twice a week.